Okay, so USDC on Solana kicked off in May. In August, there was a circulating supply that hit 1 billion. And then by early to mid-September, it had more than doubled and it hit 2.5 billion, I think September 13th or so. So what do you attribute that growth to specifically on the Solana network?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch, and maybe just to answer that question a little bit of context. I think we made a decision to bring USDC to Solana like last summer, and really kind of raced to get it online and operational, basically in time for the CRM launch, and really saw the promise of DeFi primitives on a blockchain like Solana. And work closely with, the FTX team and Solana team to kind of bring that online. And I think, it's been interesting to watch because there's like these building blocks that keep building up. And, the whole theme of like these composable money Lego bricks is actually starting to happen. And so to kind of get to the heart of your question, I think we sort of saw kind of like a steady kind of growth. And then I think what you've really seen is, and this kind of correlates to these successive Solana events and the developer teams and other things that are building, is just more and more maturing, protocols and projects coming online and driving demand, driving issuance, projects that were launching on Solana that were using USDC as part of how they launched, and so all those things kind of have contributed, and we really saw kind of acceleration, as you said, kind of going into September, and it was very correlated to the growth. If you look at like the growth in TVL on Solana, USDC growth kind of charts that a little bit, as well. And, that's like at a high level, certainly what we've seen. I think one of the other things is recently we've seen, much more rapid adoption of USDC on Solana on major crypto exchanges. And so from a centralized exchange perspective, I think that's driving growth because when you're actively in these markets, capital efficiency is sort of the core of your business. And capital efficiency, there's a lot of ways that you achieve capital efficiency, but clearly like reducing your actual cost and then increasing the speed with which you can actually move value increases capital efficiency in very measurable ways. And so I think the ability for people who are settling trades to lower cost, increase speed, and do that now across, Binance, Huobi, OKX, and FTX and others has been a real significant thing. And I think, it's been all of those things I think have been contributing and will continue to contribute to the growth.
Well, you said something interesting there about when you had made the decision, because this isn't just something where you snap your fingers and bang, you're on Solana, right? So how much of it was serendipity? How much of it was really believing in Solana? Because you're also on, obviously, Ethereum, but also Hedera, Tron, Stellar, Algorand. Was the general strategy to get on multiple blockchains and kind of see which ones ended up taking off, or was it more pinpointed than that?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, when we launched USDC, there were a number of things in the original kind of vision and white paper, and I think conceptually we think of USDC as a protocol itself, as a protocol for sort of fiat representations on the internet, dollars on the internet, and we want it to be cross-platform. We want it to be something that can be supported across what we think of as new internet operating systems. And we think about in particular, mostly third generation blockchains are kind of like this operating system layer that you can build on top of. And there's a lot of competition in that. But I think critically, our view is that we want to make sure that the protocol's, supported, broadly. And in particular, we're very interested in, solving some of the problems in scalability and cost. And I think, again, kind of going back to the vision of USDC, ultimately our goal is that we want the storage and movement of value, in particular, this sort of hybrid, fiat digital currency value that it kind of represents today. We want to drive the cost of storing and transmitting value to zero. And we think that that's possible. We think that's part of the fundamental promise of public blockchain money. And so really getting to that point has been really important. So starting in early 2020, we really began to think about, okay, what are blockchains that have, significantly more cost-effective and scalable transaction processing. And, we looked at a number of projects. We got excited about Solana. I think we saw that it was going to be an ecosystem that had real developer traction. There are a lot of things about Solana that were attractive. As a technologist myself, I'm excited about the ability to use modern programming languages on top of these infrastructures. I think we're still super, super early in terms of the number of actual engineers, software engineers that are building for blockchains. And so I was excited about a number of things about the architecture. But in particular, I think as we engaged with the team and the early ecosystem that was building around it, we could see that this had a lot of really strong potential. But in this ultimate vision of how do you make the storage and movement of value, kind of a free service on the internet, projects like Solana bring us closer to that. And so those were kind of key drivers for us. And yeah, it is a lot of work to bring USDC to a chain. It's not just here's this token or SPL library. There's a huge amount behind the scenes operationally from a security, compliance, operations, infrastructure, treasury management, all kinds of things that go on behind the scenes, because we enable people to kind of swap seamlessly across chains and things like that. So there's a lot to support it fully, and now developers can use Circle APIs and natively integrate fiat rails and custody and other things right into their own apps that just settles natively in Solana USDC.
You talked a little bit about going between chains, and Solana's got a lot of on its website talks a lot about a multi-chain future. And I'm wondering a little bit about the importance of that. And I'm also wondering for those people who kind of are on Ethereum or are on Binance Smart Chain or are on Solana, they've kind of got their mini sort of bubbles. And folks that are newbies are like, wait, now what type of USDC do I need? Like, how do I do that? How are you guys addressing that for people that are maybe overwhelmed by all of the different blockchains that are out there?
Well, so one of the things that we've built is in particular for projects, products, services that are involved in custody. So that could be an exchange, that could be a consumer wallet that has a custodial feature, that could be an actual custodian, fintechs building payment apps, other things. We basically provide an API that provides cross-chain swaps as fast as you can actually create addresses and move value on those chains. So that's something we do. And that makes it easier, say, for an exchange that wants to enable support for different transfer mechanisms of USDC to kind of light that up without having to do a whole lot themselves. Now, when we think about different use cases, obviously, you start to run into things. So if the use case is sort of moving value between yield farming tactics across chains, right? You have, more and more of these trusted or trustless bridges that are taking different strategies there. But I think as we think about, consumer scale applications, like I want to open up my wallet and make a payment to an online merchant at the speed of the internet and have that all work. I think consumers, they're not going to want to know anything about what's the underlying protocol that I'm using. Just like when I send an email with whatever webmail or mobile app, I'm not thinking about is this SMTP or IMAP or POP or who knows what, right? We don't really think about that as users. And so I think I think one of the biggest opportunities, frankly, for developers is building the UX conventions that make this kind of disappear a little bit into the background. There's some missing pieces to really truly have that work. And it is going to be a multi-chain world. I'm definitely not a single chain maximalist at all. I think it is going to be a multi-chain world. And so you are going to need both, trusted and trustless ways to kind of move value across those that should be as invisible as possible to users.
Right. So we started by talking a little bit about the big growth of USDC on Solana, hitting 2.5 billion in September. And I looked, and as of the beginning of November, it's still at 2.5 billion. And I'm wondering, why the plateau? Is that just kind of normal market stuff? Or do you feel as though there are specific use cases that Solana developers should be working on to really help, that would really help grow that number? Right now, I think USDC has double the amount that Tether does. It's the most used stablecoin on the network. But what does it need to really go from 2.5 billion to closer to what it does on, say, Ethereum?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really any one thing, meaning I think there are so many projects in GameFi, in NFTs, in DeFi, in payments, in all these kind of categories, all of which benefit from having a high quality, liquid, price stable, dollar digital currency like USDC. So I think really growth in the ecosystem as a whole will drive that. Clearly, there's a lot. There are a lot of new users coming into crypto right now. You've seen that in the growth numbers from exchanges and other things. And I think a really big thing is people, when they discover the usability of a high performance, kind of infrastructure, that's really attractive. And so I think just continuing to focus on building quality experiences, building high performance experiences, and doing things that aren't possible in other places. I mean, I think having central limit order books, for example, as a composable unit opens up all these other applications that people can build on top of. I mean, one of the apps that I'm really excited about seeing get built out and launched is like Star Atlas, which is a game, but it has a marketplace for in-game items, and it has a lot going on. So there's a lot of different things in that project, but they're able to take the Serum protocol and weave that into their game marketplace. And that's pretty powerful when you start to see these things kind of, mixed together. So I don't think there's like a silver bullet here, I guess. And I think, some of this also is going to come from just general growth in digital asset markets around the world. As digital asset markets grow, to my earlier point about like capital efficiency, as trading funds and electronic markets firms and others are kind of moving into this, they're going to go after, using dollars in the most efficient way possible. And so I think things like that will continue to drive growth as well.
And we were talking a little bit beforehand about use cases around digital identity, which I think has maybe fallen a little bit by the wayside as folks have been working on decentralized exchanges, lending protocols. Where do you see digital identity projects falling into the Solana ecosystem?
I mean, I think in general, one of the most critical missing pieces for mainstream scale use of decentralized financial market infrastructure and crypto financial infrastructure is some mechanism of decentralized identity that is connected to real world identity issuers, but where individuals can kind of take their identity proofs, put them in their own self-custody, interact with wallets, protocols, other things that are decentralized, but still enable sort of compliant interactions to happen. Now, on the one hand, I think the sort of purist view would be the whole point of this is not to have any identity, to have it be completely anonymous and have it be completely decentralized. So you're not dependent at all on the real world, so to speak, or on dependencies on centralized institutions. On the other hand, if you look at the infrastructure and say, we're building the new sort of the new economic infrastructure of the world, and we're building the new capital market infrastructure of the world, and we're building the new payments and settlement layers of the world, and we're doing that on chain, you do want to be able to have a way to connect identity. And I think this gets to kind of a little bit of the regulatory nexus, which is, there's an example, which is, the Global Standards Organization for financial crimes related regulation, FATF, just this last week came out with their guidelines on expectations around, basically dealing with identity issues. And these issues aren't going away. I think people can put their head in the sand and say, no, we're going to resist this. And, we're all going to go somewhere where we can not deal with that. But like, if you want to bring 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion people into the benefits of the infrastructure, we have to find ways to do that. So my view is that this is a really critical piece of the puzzle. I think that, standards need to emerge that make that possible for protocol developers, wallet developers, and others to kind of deal with decentralized identity. We saw a really interesting project recently between Civic and Ethereum DEX. I apologies, I don't remember the project, but basically kind of building permissioned, permissioned liquidity and things like that. I think you're going to see more and more of that. And I think that's what's going to make decentralized finance accessible and usable by much more mainstream, both people and institutions.
So you mentioned kind of the real world and then building something in sort of the digital world. And recently everyone's been talking about Facebook because of its metaverse project, and that could breathe some life into its own DM stablecoin, its Novi wallet projects. And Circle has a connection to Novi. You brought on its chief compliance officer in May. Your partner in USDC, Coinbase, is a member of the DM Association. But then when the Novi wallet launched, it didn't choose the DM stablecoin because of regulatory issues, but Paxos. Do you see any sort of opportunity for USDC to integrate with Facebook in the future and partner with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you step back away from Facebook for a moment and you think about, large consumer fintechs, whether it's a Square or a PayPal or Robinhood or a Coinbase or Revolut or some of the things that we, brands that we know that are already really, really well-established fintechs. I mean, Facebook's not an established fintech. They don't have a widely used digital wallet. They don't really participate in that space in a meaningful way. But if you look at the established fintechs, all of them are moving to support multiple crypto assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, stablecoins. And I think it's going to be really common. I think it's going to be impossible to compete in the consumer fintech layer unless you're a multi-asset digital currency wallet. And I think that clearly that's something that Facebook's going to need to do if they want to remain competitive at all. And so our expectation is we'll see USDC adopted in a lot of places, and we hope to be one of the assets amongst other different crypto assets that they would support. And I think you've seen public comments from David Marcus that kind of allude to that vision for what they're trying to do.
Okay. Jeremy Allaire, CEO of Circle. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Cheers.